There is tons of PC hardware news to talk about today. The most exciting thing is GPU prices dropping. We'll definitely talk about this, but we've also got some probably less exciting news, reports from videocards.com that the 4080 Super reviews have been rescheduled a day later than initially expected. And we'll definitely talk about that. By the way, all my sources will be linked in today's video description. We are also seeing a new CPU launched from AMD. This is the 8000G series. And I don't review CPUs or get CPU review samples sent to me, but I will take, I have looked at some reviews of these. I really was interested in something Hardware Unboxed was testing out here because the exciting feature in these is their new APU. So I want to talk about what are my thoughts on that? Because that's the integrated graphics processor, because it's both exciting and disappointing at the same time. Imagine that. And then we've got a whole bunch of other crazy stuff to talk about today. Look at a 3080 passively cooled. Whoa. Anyway, tons of stuff to talk about today. Let's start with the GPU price drops. So if you monitor my community page, I'm always checking GPU prices, and just because that's part of what I cover on the channel. And if I notice them drop, I usually post it on my community page. And yeah, they're affiliate links. So if you do want to buy one, I do get a tiny percentage of the cut. Seems like a win-win situation to me. But anyway, yesterday, I noticed an ASRock Challenger model for the 7800 XT dropping below MSRP. And this is the first time I had ever seen a 7800 XT below MSRP. Remember, the MSRP is $500. Now today, I saw a different model on Newegg drop to $480, a $20 price drop below MSRP, and then that same model got discounted on Amazon to the same price if you clicked the coupon code. And yes, I say coupon, not coupon, and you can just deal with that and accept. You just have to accept that. Anyway, but why is this interesting? Well, this is clearly a response to NVIDIA's Super Series GPUs because GPU pricing on these had actually been going above MSRP. If we look at a pricing history of 7800 XTs, I think this tells the story. So this is the pricing history monitored at PC Part Picker for that ASRock Challenger model. Notice that when the cards launched, they did originally launch at their MSRP of $500. However, you can see the blue line here, which is Newegg, starting in early December, jumped up to 520, then 550, then down to 540, 520, 540, 530, 550, and it was in holding that price throughout the first half of January. And this has been the case on many 7800 XT models. But then we get the 40 Super announcements, and then right before the 4070 Super comes out, we see the price drop to 510. Then shortly afterwards, 500 even MSRP, and now the discount down to 489. So we can see there's a clear reaction to the Super Series dropping prices, and this is what I hoped to see happen when we got those Super Series cards, is some downward pressure on the rest of the pricing market. So that's pretty exciting. And I'm hoping to see continued downward movement for these GPUs, especially given if we now kind of pop back into other GPUs. If I look at something like the 4070 Super, it is still available in stock at its $599.99 MSRP. And the fact that they didn't sell out at MSRP could mean that it does, again, have more of that additional downward pressure on cards like the 4070, which are supposed to be discounted to 550, but we're seeing at least two models below that 550 mark. And then again, are we going to get more downward pressure from that? Now, I'm hoping to also see that in the higher end cards, like the 4070 Ti, which is discontinued, but there is still supply available. Because versus the Super, there you are getting more VRAM and all that on the Super model. And then what happens with the AMD competition, like the 7900 XT? Well, those did drop in price in response, but there's kind of holding where they dropped to initially, right around 720 on the cheapest models and kind of going up from there. I'd like to see movement down to at least, like 699 and below would be exciting to see there. The other question is the 4080 Super launching, right? The 4080s are 1160. The 4080 Super should be offering very similar performance, perhaps slightly faster, has 5% more CUDA cores. but the MSRP should be $1,000, right? So what happens to your 4080s that are already in stock, and also what happens to the 7900 XTX? Because the 7900 XTX has been holding around the $950 mark, occasionally dipping below for a while now. But, you know, right now they're holding a $200 price gap versus the 4080. But if the 4080 Super actually hits $999, I don't think a $50 price gap makes as much sense now for AMD. So are we going to get more downward pressure? And if there's downward pressure on the XTX, does that push the XT down further? If the XTX gets close in price to 4070 Ti Super, you know, what happens to that? Can that hold its MSRP? And so those are a bunch of questions that we're going to need to monitor over the course of the next few weeks and months, is what is the trickle-down effect? Because like I said, we're seeing it right now on the 7800 XT. How far will that go? What will happen to the rest of the product stack? And I'm very curious what happens with that. Now, another thing then on that note is, what about the 4080 Super? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, videocards.com is reporting that the reviews have been rescheduled to January 31st. Now, why is that being reported as the case? And also, what does that mean? Well, originally, videocards.com had reported that the review embargo should lift on January 30th. And we know that the cards should be on shelf, according to NVIDIA's official announcement, on January 31st, which means that the review embargo date is now going to be the same as the product on sale date rather than the day before, if videocards.com is correct here. Now, they're claiming that the decision is apparently, they're saying, unrelated to driver issues, that the delay is due to problems with RTX 4080 Super Founders Edition card shipments getting to reviewers basically late. Some of them did not receive their samples on time, with some only receiving them this weekend, and many even just today. So that is the reported reason, is that it was difficult to get the products out. Videocards.com also is mentioning that January has been absolutely insane for tech reviewers, because you've had not only the launch of the 4070 Super, and then followed a week later by the 4070 Ti Super, and now a week later by the 4080 Super, but in between you also had the launch of the RX 7600 XT from AMD, and as I mentioned today, the Ryzen 8000G series processors. Also review embargo lifting today. So it's absolutely crazy. And there was also CES at the beginning of the month, which a lot of tech media actually attended in person, which involves traveling, and that kind of throws off your schedule. So it's been absolutely crazy. Anyway, just a reminder, the 4080 Super, okay, maybe the review is delayed, but we do have the official specs, right? So the official specs are, it is slightly more CUDA cores. We're talking 5% than the 4080. And other than that, you know, the boost clock, an extra 50 megahertz, the memory clock from 22.4 to 23, giving you slightly more memory bandwidth at the same TDP. So are we expecting much from this? Well, another thing I'll remind you is that when I had my media pre-briefing from NVIDIA regarding their 40 series announcement, remember my red text in my video on that? This is what I asked them in that meeting. How do these cards compare to their previous generation? And according to NVIDIA, they specifically said it's only 2 or 3% faster than the 4080. So that is NVIDIA's claim when talking to me in a pre-briefing about the card announcements. So effectively, they were basically saying it's just a $200 price cut on the 4080. That's technically, it's different hardware, but it's it's a $200 price cut on the 4080. So if a 4080 for $1,000 sounds good to you, I mean, there's pretty much your 4080 Super review ahead of time, according to the official specs that have already been announced, and what the NVIDIA representative told me. Now, if you want to measure, is what the NVIDIA representative said reasonable, and how has it lined up to reality? Well, here's what they told me about the 4070 Super. They said it would be about 15% faster than a 4070, and in my testing, it was usually between 10 and 18% faster, with 15% faster being a pretty common result. How about the 4070 Ti Super? They told me it would be about 10% faster than the 4070 Ti at the same price with more VRAM. In my testing, it was often 5 to 10% faster. So 10% is maybe the better end of those results, but isn't a crazy difference compared to what I think most review outlets had it something like 6 to 8% faster. And this is somewhat lining up with that, right? So Nvidia is now claiming, was claiming 2 to 3% faster than the 4080. That sounds like a reasonable expectation, right? So if you don't get the review before the cards go available for sale, that's NVIDIA's official claims on it, and it seems to line up pretty closely to the 5% boost on the specs, right? For the CUDA cores, which don't always scale linearly with the performance increase. Now, like I said, there was another big product launch today. We had the Ryzen 8700G. I've read a number of reviews. This one here is from PC Gamer, and you know, they're highlighting that this is the best ever desktop integrated graphics. I just accidentally resized my browser window. Let me fix that back to normal. Anyway, excellent power efficiency, the integrated AI coprocessor, and just how it destroys the 5700G predecessor, but they're highlighting the lack of PCIe 5.0 support, which maybe, and I believe it's only at like ×8, right? So also saying, so that makes it maybe not the best option for use with a discrete GPU. And Hardware Unboxed was targeting like, but does it even make sense to buy this for the APU? And again, I'm not gonna show you all of their results, but this one particular test, and please, again, all my sources will be linked in the video description, kind of highlights the point. What if you bought a less expensive CPU and a cheap discrete GPU, and you bought that instead for a similar price? The 8700G isn't cheap. So it has, for an APU, very, very strong gaming performance on its integrated graphics for an APU, which still puts it significantly behind a discrete GPU like the RX 6600, which currently costs less than $200. If you wanted to buy a RX 6600 right now, it's looking like our lowest price is about $200 even. I've seen them as low as like $180. $190 has not been uncommon. $200 is very easy to find, right? So then if you get something like a 12100F, which is not a GPU, which is why it's not showing up on my GPU list. If we go for something like a 12100, 12100F, it looks like you get that for $100. So it'll also probably have a less expensive motherboard and RAM and things like that because it's on the older platform. So you can see that then if you compare that to the 8700G, I think this PC Gamer article has the MSRP. Yeah, the 8700G coming in at $329. You see the problem if what you're just going for is a bang for the buck solution. Now, that's on the 8700G. Where I think this might become more interesting as a budget option is the Ryzen 5 8600G. Now, to be clear, not only are you getting less CPU cores and threads, you're also stepping the GPU down from a 12 compute unit GPU to an 8 compute unit GPU. So it absolutely will not be as good as the performance of the 8700G, but you're knocking $100 off the price point, which now puts it as less expensive than something like a 12100F and an RX 6600. So I think that makes it a bit more of an interesting value proposition than the 8700G, even if it doesn't get as good absolute performance numbers. I think if we scroll through this article, you can see that I don't want the CPU testing, I want the actual gaming on the GPU testing. So you can see here the 8600G in F122. Again, these are not my results as PC gamers. I'm not gonna show you all of their results. Follow the link in the video description. Sounds like my kids just got home, so sorry if it's noisy. Anyway, you can see it's definitely falling short of the 8700G, but we're not talking like a completely different gaming experience, right? So if you'd be sort of happy with the 8700G integrated graphics for a while, it's not that big of a step down to go to the 8600G, and it's $100 less, so you're now then maybe in more of the value makes sense kind of a situation. And you're still almost doubling the performance of the 5700G. So again, as an integrated GPU, it's incredibly impressive, generational uplift there on that. So anyway, just keep in mind what you're buying it for if you are trying to buy one of these, because you always have to consider, what if you just buy an older, cheaper CPU and a cheap GPU? It's very likely you could end up with better gaming performance than just going with the APU solution. Now, how about we move on to some Intel news? So we have rumors suggesting that Intel is not planning on add-in mobile cards with their Battlemage GPUs. Now, Battlemage architecture could be used as, in APUs, in integrated graphics, and in discrete desktop GPUs. But I'm getting this from videocards.com, but it looks like their source is a slide published by Moore's Law is Dead, which is claiming that that there will be no mobile MRB add-in video cards on the Battlemage product roadmap. So make of that what you will. I don't think that means, Battlemage is dead. That just means they're, thinking about where it makes the most sense, and apparently the added mobile cards is not where they were feeling like it makes the most sense. I'm very excited for Battlemage. Perhaps I shouldn't be, but Intel has made a lot of strides on their drivers, which was one of the biggest issues with their initial release of the Arc Alchemist. So I'm very excited for Battlemage because Intel has seemed to be very willing to target the budget card market very aggressively to try to get into the market and get some market share. Also, performance-wise, there's a lot more low-hanging fruit on an architectural uplift when you're going from your first generation product to your second generation product versus where AMD and Nvidia are. For AMD and Nvidia, getting huge performance gains generation to generation can be a lot more difficult if you've already, are working with extremely optimized architecture and drivers. But if you're coming from a driver or architecture that has major issues, well, that's bad for the initial released product. It means that fixing those issues can sometimes add massive performance gains. So I am cautiously excited for Battlemage, in that I hope that Intel continues to price aggressively to capture market share, and I hope they continue to target that lower end market, because the reality of the situation is, I think most people are still more interested in a $200 to $300 graphics card than a $600 graphics card. So I think cards like the 4070 Super are offering interesting performance, but in a price class that I just think prices out the majority of the PC gaming market. So I don't know. Let's see what comes with Battlemage, but I am certainly hopeful that it will be exciting. Now, in other Intel news, we are seeing Intel CEO claiming that Panther Lake will deliver twice the AI performance over Arrow Lake, basically saying that they're looking for extreme advancements in AI. Now, this is obviously the buzzword in the PC hardware market right now with AI and AI performance, and these big companies, AMD, Intel, Nvidia are all chasing that AI stuff. For me, though, when it comes to the AI performance on a local client, laptop or desktop, I'm just curious, because right now I feel like what software exactly is this targeting that would be, not demanding enough that you don't need a discrete desktop GPU to do it, that it will be running okay on these little neural processing units, but what is it? What are people doing? Microsoft has talked about, adding in all these more AI features to the Windows operating system and things like that. I'm curious. I mean, AMD is doing the same thing. You can see with their new 8700G release that that one of the things here is that it has an integrated AI coprocessor. So that is a thing now. But again, I'm not using those right now. I'm curious how the software will develop within our operating systems and daily use case, where the AI will be happening locally on these coprocessors versus just like within your browser happening in the cloud. Or more powerful things happening locally on a more powerful discrete GPU. But anyway, we'll have to see what happens. In other news, we're seeing Asus ROG Ally successor most likely to launch this year. You might be like, didn't we just get the ROG Ally? Yeah, so really this year? Well, this information is apparently coming from Asus's India vice president. So that's pretty high up in the company making that claim. That would be somebody you would assume would be knowledgeable on it. The direct quote being, "We most likely will launch a second generation handheld gaming console this year." Now, it does say most likely, it doesn't say guaranteed, but it does say this year. "And we will still keep the Windows features, but we will focus more on gaming." Now, that's pretty interesting. Also coming out in that interview that apparently in India alone, although this is not giving numbers from other regions, Asus has apparently shipped over 70,000 ROG Ally units. So apparently there's definitely sales there, and that's why they'd be interested in following up on that with future products. But, you have like Valve with their Steam Deck, for example, talking about how they're going to delay, a Steam Deck 2 until hardware offers a more meaningful performance bump. I think they're trying to set more of a stable baseline for game developers targeting Steam Deck support, for example, and the system, the performance of something like an ROG Ally with that APU, can deliver better gaming performance, although often at higher power targets than what you see in a Steam Deck. So do we have anything coming out that's going to justify an upgrade here? The videocards.com article is saying that it would probably be aligning up with rumors we're seeing around like AMD's Strix Point APUs coming at some point this year in 2024. And they're reporting that those would be potentially including up to 16 compute units of RDNA 3.5 graphics, which would go beyond the 12 compute units of RDNA 3 that we're seeing in the ROG Ally, as well as more CPU cores, and some of them being the Zen 5C cores and 4 Zen 5 Plus. So there is a potentially exciting new APU that could be coming out this year that could feature in products like this. Anyway, I'm really interested in these handheld PCs. So I'll be, because again, we're in the desktop space with something like the 8700G, you have to think about, okay, but would it make more sense to buy a cheap CPU and a discrete GPU? In a handheld PC like this, that's less of a competing option, right? So these APUs and their performance become, I think, more exciting. We're also seeing reports of a Kraken Point APU coming from AMD with 4 Zen 5 and 4 Zen 5C cores. Not a lot of info on this at this point. Looks like, tweets about it, that kind of a thing. Looks like Moore's Law is Dead also releasing some information on that with a leaked slide. So we have to see what comes of all of these APUs, but let's go ahead and move on to another piece of AMD news that I think is less exciting, which is that AMD's Link is apparently getting discontinued. Now, I never tried this out. I've tried out most of the AMD software stuff and released videos testing it out. However, I never got around to AMD Link, which was a game streaming service. So you could like stream it to a mobile app locally from your PC, all from within the AMD driver software without having to go to some kind of third-party solution. But it is looking like, again, that is being discontinued. If you had been using that, and I'm curious if anybody had been in the comment section, you would need to be leaning into a different option. One of these local streaming options I've tried out recently was Moonlight. Do they mention that here? Yeah. Moonlight with Sunshine, which is a pretty cool streaming app. I've been using it on my Steam Deck because I think it works a lot better than Steam Remote Play, although you do have to kind of set it up yourself. This is a bit of a setup. It's not as directly integrated, but... and by the way, Steam Remote Play is another option you could use for local streaming, although that would only be for Steam games. Now, Let's move on to some other hardware news. Samsung's next-gen GDDR7 memory, which would be featured in next-gen GPUs at some point, is apparently offering 37 gigabits per second pin speeds, which would be 54% faster than GDDR6. Do we have any pin speeds here referenced in this? Because, for example, actually, let me go back to the 4080 Super specs that we were looking at. I think that table had at videocards.com. So, for example, if we look at the memory speeds on the 40 series lineup, you can see like 21 gigabits per second, and then 22.4 on the 4080, 23 on the 4080 Super. So if you compare that to what we're seeing here, you know, 37 is a big jump there, right? That's a lot more. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what that does for next-gen GPU performance. However, I have another thought on that, which is I'm actually curious how memory bandwidth limited these GPUs actually are. Because if I actually hop back over here, a lot of people were expecting more performance from the 4070 Ti Super versus the 4070 Ti non-Super than what we actually ended up seeing, because we got a large memory bandwidth jump by the move to the wider bit bus, and yet we still, in many games, saw single-digit performance gains. Like, there were games that were like 5% better. Like, that wasn't an uncommon result. Although in certain other situations, it was 10, 15%, or sometimes even more. But again, I think that can be how memory bandwidth limited was that particular application, because NVIDIA's 40 series did move to a very large L2 cache with the stated goal of reducing the need for the larger memory bandwidth, which is how they were trying to get by with the smaller bit bus. So I'm actually just really curious, if you continue having that large L2 cache, how much performance gains you get from moving to a massively faster memory. Because again, that 4070 Ti Super testing did make me question how memory bandwidth limited a lot of those games actually were. But maybe I'm reading way too much into that. Anyway, the announcement is there's some speeds coming out soon on Samsung's next-gen memory. Moving on to some GPU cooler model news, we are seeing MSI's Expert RTX 4080 Supercard confirmed, and we see some designs on that. I think these are interesting in that I love NVIDIA's Founders Edition designs for the last couple generations, and this reminds me of that. The problem is, it reminds me of it, but also, in my opinion, looks just a little bit worse. So it looks like it's doing something very similar, but not quite as good, at least to my taste. Also, I've seen some complaints of the color, because this looks like a little bit kind of a bronzy sort of color, rather than just like a silver and black, which might conflict with some other metal colors within your case. So that's kind of interesting. But overall, I do like the overall move of a less gamery design where you see things very plasticky and like RGB colors and things like that. I am more of a fan of the kind of sleek metallic design with less or no RGB, but that's personal preferences. We're also seeing Gigabyte launching RTX 4070 and 4060 Eagle Ice graphics cards, so you could take a look at those, especially if you're interested in a white GPU. And we're also seeing a Redditor passively cooling a 3080. Apparently not very actually like working order, and you couldn't really fit this in a case or anything, but I just had to post the picture because look at that. If you really don't like fan noise, just strap on a whole bunch of metal to that GPU and see what happens. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Let's move to a little bit of game news, but it's looking like this video is running a bit long, so we'll move through it quick. Forza Motorsport launched in my opinion, pretty rough shape on PC. You could watch my video testing it out at launch. It's looking like the update 5.0 will improve performance by reducing CPU spikes and improving GPU utilization. There is a big list of potential updates happening here. You could take a closer look at that if you are playing the game. Now, we'll move quickly here. We are also seeing that the Horizon Forbidden West Complete Edition, which will be coming for PC, will apparently have DLSS 3 support. It will have FSR support. It doesn't specifically say FSR 3. I hope it has FSR 3 frame generation. We'll have to see. XeSS support and DirectStorage support. So a lot of cool features, and this is coming from Nixxes. Doing the port, and they have done an excellent job with supporting those types of features in the past, so that's pretty exciting. In Sony-related news, there's apparently a big State of Play coming this week featuring 15 games and an over 40-plus minute show. In other gaming news, Deus Ex Revival coming from Eidos Montreal has reportedly been canceled by Embracer Group, who has been scaling back a lot of their game development due to financial issues. And I think that's really disappointing because I do really like the Deus Ex series, and also just not good to see more industry job losses incoming. Now, in games that probably, people kept wondering if it would eventually get canceled because it keeps getting delayed for many, many, many years. It looks like Skull and Bones will be coming out, and the open beta should be dropping in February, and they have updated the PC specs and outlined some year one content. So, Skull and Bones, here's the system requirements. So 4K, you'd want to be on upscaling at the balanced preset on a GPU of the 3080 or 6800 XT class, but that is at the ultra settings. Looks like 1440p, 1080p, not requiring as much. And if you just want to play the game at 30 FPS at 1080p low, you could probably get by with like a GTX 1060. So it's looking like a lot of people should be able to play the game, but cranking it to maximum settings at high resolutions will take a lot more horsepower. Speaking of taking a lot of horsepower, we have seen RTX Remix hitting open beta, and apparently the Max Payne, RTX Remix, which isn't finished, but you can download. It's featuring some updated models, as well as adding in the path tracing and things like that. It has been tested performance-wise by MX Benchmark PC on YouTube, showing frame rates dropping from hundreds to 60. So big drops in frame rate to enable, but is at least up and running on a 4080. So I'm interested to see what we see from these types of RTX Remix mods. We're also seeing a Call of Duty World at War RTX Remix path tracing demo now available for download. It looks like one of these zombie maps can be played. So again, I'm really interested where all of this goes, but I hope you all enjoyed this video, found it useful and or interesting. And a huge thank you to viewers, huge thank you to subscribers, and especially huge thank you to those of you who have supported the channel directly financially by clicking the join button. It means a lot to me to see that you guys value the content enough to do that, and it's a huge motivation for me seeing you guys valuing it to that level. However, I totally understand not everybody is in a financial position to do that. So again, a huge thank you to viewers, subscribers, commenters, all of that, and I hope everyone has an excellent day.